Sometimes leather fragrances can just be overly leathery, dark, smoky, animalic, and you want a little sweetness added to it. And I thought the best way to do leather fragrances, at least ones that I'm enjoying lately, are adding fruits to them. So in today's video, I'm talking about fruity leather fragrances. You're going to find out about them coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sebastian. We're talking about fruity leather fragrances. Do you enjoy this style? Let me know if you like leather fragrances in general, and what are some of your favorite leather fragrances, and if you enjoy fruity leather fragrances. I've got 21 fragrances here. We're going to try and get through the list as fast as possible. It's a ranked list, and I do have my very first fruity leather fragrance that I started wearing back in 2013 here as a bonus option as well. It's sadly discontinued. But starting off with the House of Estee Lauder, it's Paradise Moon, this one right here. So this is a very fresh take on leather. To me, when you're wearing it, there's a transparency about it. It doesn't feel heavy, dense, and very leathery, and even though there's leather here. And then the fruitiness in this one we're getting from osmanthus, so it's creating a apricot, peach kind of characteristic in here, but very fresh, a bit citrusy as well. And then of course you've got some ambery touches when it's drying down. To me, it also smells like there's a bit of tea in here as well, because osmanthus is used as a tea. So in the end, it's a very fresh take on a fruity leather fragrance, Paradise Moon from the House of Estee Lauder. So next up, we've got a fragrance from the House of Sospiro, and I've got two Sospiro fruity leather fragrances here. This first one at 20 is Opera Grande, this one right here. So I put this one at the bottom because I don't get much fruitiness. What I get from it is like a bubblegummy leather. I don't know why I get bubblegum with this one, but something in here mixed together with notes creates an accord of bubblegum. Almost seems like there's white floral notes in here, but I don't, except for the ylang ylang, which is really a yellow floral note, I don't see like white floral notes listed. It's fruity notes, cedar, leather, ylang ylang, Turkish rose, ambergris, patchouli, vanilla, vetiver, musk, and nutmeg. Very potent fragrance, as are the fragrances of Sospiro, but this is definitely not one of my uber favorites. My favorite happens to be Dolce Melodia. You guys all are aware of that one. It was one of my most worn fragrances of last year. This one sadly at the bottom, but for now this fruity leather fragrance called Opera Grande doesn't act very fruity. It's more like bubblegum. Next, going to the House of Guerlain, it's Cuir Intense from the Absolute Oriental collection. I believe that's what it's called. I'm forgetting the name of this collection. There's a lot of names of collections to keep track of. This one, to me, it's a leather, and the leather is really, really great, but for me, the fruitiness is very, very minute, so I put it at the bottom because it's not really very fruity leathery. But it has notes of leather. There's musk, tobacco, sandalwood, cedar, osmanthus, and ylang ylang. So it's the osmanthus, once again, like Paradise Moon, giving us whatever fruitiness that this gives us. Again, the fruitiness is kind of minute, not very strong, and whatever fruitiness you're going to get from this one, it's that apricot, peachy, nectarine-like quality that the osmanthus provides. But either way, I think it's those folks that want leather, mostly leather with some, accents of fruitiness or something, will be appreciating something like this. So this is Cuir Intense from the House of Guerlain. So next we've got a fragrance from the House of Penhaligon's. This is Halfeti Leather, this one right here. And to me, I should say, leather and plums are a great, great combo. Unfortunately here, it's not one of my favorites. We have got a few others that are further down the list. But here, out of the Halfetis, I don't really love this one too much. Halfeti Cedar is my favorite. But this one is definitely the leather, the oud, the incense, and then also we've got plums in here. It creates a bit of a kind of a plum jam kind of a consistency here, but it's prune plums. And then you've got cardamom, cedar, patchouli, green notes, and rose thrown in as well. It's created by Christian Provenzano, who's created all three of the Penhaligon's Halfeti fragrances. And again, I think the most popular is the original Halfeti. I prefer the Halfeti Cedar, which is cedar and boozy notes. Here, it's nice. It's a pleasant fragrance. It's definitely not at the bottom, but it is further in the bottom, not at the top of the list. But, this one has fans. Let me know if you're a fan of Halfeti leather and if you like the combination of plums and leather together. Next up, going to the House of Nichane, it's Saffron Colonisé, this one right here. So this one is ranked low because for me this is a very fresh fragrance, and we're matching it against these very robust, intense leather fragrances, this one comes off very, very fresh, light, and airy. Of course, it's a cologne concentration. It's called Saffron Colonisé, and saffron typically is found to be used to create a leather accord in fragrances, and you can totally notice that it is saffron. The leather accord and leather from saffron do smell a bit different, and I do enjoy saffron leather fragrances, really do. And here, it is a really great fragrance. I think it's a total alternative for something very fresh, their original Colonisé, where you want some more substance. But again, when you're comparing them next to the other fragrances, it's pretty light. But it's saffron, it's cedrat, grapefruit, there's passion fruit, leather, musk, ambergris, pink pepper. So the fruitiness in this comes from the passion fruit, but it's very, very fresh, as I said. I think if those of you that don't like really heavy, weighty fragrances and you prefer something more like Paradise Moon from Estee Lauder, but you want even fresher, then you would go with something like Saffron Colonisé from Annie Charnet. So in this video, we've got 4 fragrances created by Julien Rasconnay. I feel like he does really great things with leather and fruits. He does do really great work with fruits. The first of which, at number 16, is Aquila Absolute, this one right here from the house of Electimus London. For me, this is a really hefty, big, beefy fragrance, but I felt like the fruitiness was a bit lacking. I feel like also Julien does really great work with raspberry, but in here I don't get the raspberries as much, but there is definitely an ozonic quality against the leather. It is a great fragrance. The only reason I've ranked it lower is because the fruits are not in your face, and I want a fruity leather fragrance to be in my face. There's a few others. In fact, one of his fragrances is very much at the very top, but Aquila Absolute turned out to be here. It's mostly a very nice blend of violet leaves, leather, raspberries, geranium, oud, labdanum, patchouli, rose, and cardamom. And just imagine all of these notes getting a great balance of their presence in this fragrance. Nothing is standing out too much, and with an ozonic quality throughout it with the violet leaves. So Aquila Absolute from the house of Electimus London. Then going to the house of Juicebox, we've got Night Flow, also created by Julien Rasconnay, and for me this one is really close to something like Tuscan Leather. It's got leather accord, saffron, raspberry, pink pepper. There's also Davana, which is actually really quite nice in this. The Davana adds a little green booziness, along with patchouli, tolu, osmanthus, jasmine, ambergris accord. And with this one, it's the raspberry, and then of course the osmanthus as well. And the osmanthus not only gives us the fruitiness, but also a leathery touch. So I feel like the osmanthus is bringing out some of its leatheriness to, work with the leather and saffron in this to further enhance the leatheriness. But I like it. The only reason it's ranked a little low because it does give me very much Tuscan Leather vibes. So we have Tuscan Leather on the list. It'll be coming up later, and that's why I put this one further down the list. So it's Night Flow from the house of Juicebox. Some people prefer that one over something like Tuscan Leather. Check them out, compare them to see. The next one is going to the house of Royal Crown. It's Itzma, this one right here. Itzma is a dried fruits take on leather, and with this one there's a leatheriness, but they've never really credited leather in this fragrance for some strange reason. For me, I always thought this would smell like the bonus fragrance I have in the bonus section after the outro, but it doesn't smell like that either because it's the combination of dried fruits and leather, and I love this combination. And when we're talking about dried fruits, I like the idea of apricots dried, nectarines, peaches, and things like that. And here you get it, but also it's working with tobacco, it's working with oud, it's working with ambergris, there's cypress, castoreum, sandalwood, peach blossom, mandarin, nutmeg, oak moss, and vanilla. And for me, I feel like the leathery accents come in from the castoreum note that's been used in this, because that's what they used to use. Maybe they still do. I don't think so, because I think everything's gone synthetic now. But in the past, they used to use the castoreum to create the leather in fragrances, and also things like birchwood, and adds that kind of leathery smokiness. But either way, it's a pleasant fragrance at number 14, Itzma from the house of Royal Crown. This next one from the house of Mind Games, it's Jadoub, this one right here. I like this one, and even though it's pomegranates, I feel like I get an green apple, crunchy, crisp, crunchy juiciness in this as well. I'm not sure where I'm getting that. Most likely the notes working together to give me this kind of a feel, but it's pomegranates, damask rose, patchouli, ambrostar, benzoin, leather. So we've got loads of ambery touches in this fragrance. Lots of fruitiness. It's juicy. It's, for me, it wears juicy, and I'm picturing or envisioning and experiencing green apples, just biting into it, and the drippiness dripping down your arm or something, because it's so juicy, because there's a major juicy component about this one. But you know, lots of amber against the leather and the fruity accents in this fragrance, which make for a very fresh leather fragrance. So this is Chadoub from the House of Mind Games. Next up, going to the House of Malbrum Parfums, which I just recently aired a video of this house with Joe. If you haven't caught it, please go catch it. This is Bagheera, this one right here. So Bagheera, it has this eye on the back. So these are 30 ml extrait de parfum fragrances, and all of them pack a punch. They're really long-lasting fragrances, and this was one of my favorite fragrances. If you go watch that video, you'll find out. Against all the leather fragrances, this is not my favorite. It's at number 12, but in that video, against all the Malbrum fragrances, it turned out to be fairly at the top. But this is very complex, really intense, long-lasting, and also really great performance, because all the notes has this major complexity, so you're experiencing lots of different things. You've got suede here, leather, papyrus. There's blackberries, black currant bud, cedarwood, black violet, velvety iris, truffle accord, ambersonite, vetimoss, ional alpha, norlimbanol, and suederol. If you watch that video, we also talk about these synthetic notes that are used in this fragrance. You'll learn about them. But very, very complex, very suede, smooth, buttery leather-like, with the fruitiness coming in, and then of course the violet touches, the iris. It's very powdery and things like that. It's a really, really great fragrance. But again, against these other fragrances, I prefer some of these a lot more. So this is Bagheera from the House of Malbrum Parfums. Please go catch that video to find out more about that fragrance and that house. The next one's from the House of Sospiro. We've got Prima Donna, this one right here. Prima Donna is more fruity leather compared to the other one that I spoke about, Opera Grande. So Prima Donna is fruity, very fruity, but also lactonic. So you almost have like a fruit milk thing happening, throwing in chocolate at the same time, and leather. So all of these notes against the leather kind of balances the leather out, takes away the roughness from the leather, which does have a little bit of roughness for me, but not necessarily. You throw in also musk, cherries, cedar, resins, muguet, amber, herbal notes, jasmine, and rose. And when you're listening to all these notes, it's almost sounding like it's not going to work out. It does work out. It does smell great. I prefer it much over Opera Grande. Prima Donna does really, really smell great, and you do experience the fruits, the leather, the lactonic qualities, the chocolate, the cherries, lots of stuff happening. For me, it's also not as great as Dolce Melodia. That to me is really, really wonderful, but Prima Donna is definitely a great fruity leather fragrance. So that is at number 11. That is Prima Donna from the House of Sospiro. Next, going to the House of Hedonique, the sister house of Francesca Bianchi. It's Divine Perversion, this one right here. For me, this also has the DNA of Francesca Bianchi fragrances, but a little different. And also this particular fragrance, it seems like it's a combination of Francesca Bianchi DNA, her leather, powder, musk, powder as in iris, musk kind of DNA, thrown in with something like Tuscan leather. So it does remind me a little bit of it, but as I said, along with the DNA of Francesca Bianchi fragrances, it has notes of raspberries, leather, there's caramel, amber, woods, animalic notes, iris, rose, pink pepper. Very, very long lasting, intense fragrance. A little goes a long way with this one. You do experience the animalic qualities, but it's a nice contrast against the caramel and the raspberries, the fruitiness in this with the leather. So it's Divine Perversion from the House of Hedonique. Let me know if you know that particular fragrance. Next, at number 9, going to the House of Parfums de Marly, it's Godolphin right here. And Godolphin to me does remind me of Tuscan leather. It has similarities, much so. They might be changing things up a little bit, so you're not going to wear the fragrances. If you wear them side by side, they're not going to smell identical. But overall, it's the same idea, and you will experience the same idea. But in the end, with Godolphin, it's leather, musk, saffron, amber, vanilla, vetiver, thyme, cypress, jasmine, rose, iris, and some fruitiness from the raspberry. It's ranked pretty high. I do appreciate it. It's one of my early fruity leather fragrance loves, and I like that because I was always a fan of Tuscan leather. then I was always seeking out other fragrances that I wanted to replicate that smelled like it, but not quite identical, if that makes sense. But Godolphin is pretty nice. It doesn't get much talked about. I think it's in the shadows of the brand with some of their other fragrances because it does have similarities to Tuscan leather. But for me, I find it to be quite great to wear if I want a little change from something like Tuscan leather. So that's Godolphin from the house of Marley, Parfums de Marley. And then we've got Byredo's take on something like Tuscan leather. It's Black Saffron, this one right here. So this is kind of a less dense take on something like Tuscan leather. So it doesn't act very heavy. It does act very fruity. It has leather, saffron, raspberries. There's the violets. Violets do come in with the fragrances of Byredo. There's blonde woods, juniper berries, vetiver, pomelo. For me, it really does perform like a Byredo fragrance. It has those kind of airiness, the ethereal qualities of Byredo fragrances. A lot of Byredo fragrances, especially in these bottles, are not really heavy and dense. And so if you like the idea of Tuscan leather and you felt it was too strong, too heavy, or other kind of fragrances that were inspired by Tuscan leather that were too heavy, this is what I would go for. If you like that smell, but you don't want it to be heavy, weighty on you, go with Black Saffron because there's very much similarities. But I should say something like Godolphin or Tuscan leather, this does have more fruitiness for me. I get much more fruits with this. I feel like they've amped up the fruitiness against the leather and saffron. Either way, Black Saffron from Byredo. Next, going to the House of Olfactive Studio. This is Chambre Noire, this one right here. Chambre Noire was one of the first fruity leather fragrances that I had purchased. This is my second model, by the way. I went through the other one in the old bottle style. And for me, they combine leather, smoky incense with prune plums. So the prune plums have this very interesting fruitiness in that it doesn't necessarily act very fruity. It's a bit more like dried fruits kind of a thing, if that makes sense. That's what I get with plums. There's more of a denseness about the actual fruitiness about it. So it's leather, incense, prune plums, patchouli, pink pepper, vanilla, violets, and papyrus. Great fragrance. It's smoky, it's woody, it's fruity, and a little plums kind of also provide a little booziness to the fragrances, but this one's not like uber boozy. And then of course, lots of leather with the spices, the vanilla, and the patchouli that comes in. Really great fragrance, inspired by this very dark photograph. If you ever have bought any of Olfactive Studios fragrances, in the box there's a photograph because it's a photography inspired brand. So Chambre Noire from the House of Olfactive Studio. And then we've got Tuscan leather. Everybody knows this one. This is the ultimate in fruity fragrances. It's leather, black suede, raspberries, amber, woods, frankincense, jasmine, saffron, and thyme. One of the first fragrances from Tom Ford where a lot of other brands started to like emulate, started to get inspired from. They all made their own Tuscan leather variations or something. In fact, Tom Ford even did it with ombre leather, which I'm not featuring here. It doesn't really have the notes of raspberries or any fruits, but there's definitely a bit of a raspberry fruitiness in that fragrance. But this one does feature the raspberries, and it does have a pretty presence. For me, this also smells like manufacturing plant, industrial greasiness with loads of leather, and that fruitiness comes in from the raspberry and brightens things up here. So Tuscan leather at number 6. Next, going to the House of Juicebox once again. This is Black Powder. This is the third fragrance created by Julien Rasconnay. Remember, we had Night Flow from Juicebox also, and then we also had Aquila Absolute right here. This one to me is different. It doesn't smell like Tuscan leather in that it has a different kind of a leather, and also it doesn't have raspberries, it has apples. And this also, once again, provides that kind of juicy, appley experience. Drippy. Remember the apples dripping down your hands and sleeves and things like that, and that's what I get with this one. Inspired by Nirvana's grunge music, because Juicebox is a music-inspired brand. So suede, tobacco, apple, black currants, frankincense, tonka beans, pimento, patchouli, sandalwood. So in addition to the apples, we also have some fruitiness from the black currants. So it has these fruits going against the tobacco and the suede. It's a bit smoky, definitely got the incense, and of course some spices thrown in as well. Really great scent. Black Powder from the the house of Juicebox. Do you know that one? Let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. And I have a full review of it from a few years ago. Not a few, actually, probably like 6 years ago. Okay, top 4. Going to the house of Xerjoff. It's Tony Iommi Monkey Special. This one's ranked pretty high because I like this. It's not only leather, but amber, fruits, and booziness together. Really wonderful offering. It's not necessarily uber dark that like leather fragrances can get, but you know, they are... It's definitely very wearable. It's very ambery. It's patchouli, labdanum, cinnamon, leather, caramel, rum, musk, vanilla, ambergris, sandalwood, passion fruit. Yeah, you've got the experience of the passion fruit in here. It's definitely here against the ambery, spicy, and woody, earthy touches. And then, of course, the leather comes in to gives you just another coating of this really denseness that the fragrance is all about. The woods, the earthy patchouli, the gourmand notes, the spices, the booziness, and the musk. I think this is great, especially for a fruity leather fragrance. It's Tony Iommi Monkey Special. And then we've got an oud fragrance that's also quite leathery from the house of Maison Crivelli. It's Oud Maracuja. It's very fruity, very, very fruity, with loads of passion fruit, abellia, saffron, Turkish rose, patchouli, benzoin, leather, amber, vanilla, labdanum, akigala wood. Wears really, really strong. It's an extrait de parfum. It's like a contrast of big, bright, juicy fruitiness against the dark notes of the leather and also the labdanum, akigala wood, patchouli, and saffron. Definitely very wearable. Oud leather fragrance. It's Oud Maracuja from Maison Crivelli. Let me know if you're a fan of that one. Number 2, this is the 4th and final Julian Rasconnay fragrance. It's from the house of Van Cleef & Arpels. It's orchid leather. This one, when it came out during the pandemic, I ordered it from France. I got it, thankfully, and was a blind buy and really, really enjoyed it. It was like after the moon, this came out, and I was really starting to appreciate the fragrances of the Julian Rasconnay. So this is vanilla, incense, plums, labdanum, cardamom. So it's orchid leather. I'm assuming they're referring to the vanilla orchid here. So it's very vanillic. I like that about it. That's why it's ranked here really high. I love vanilla. But you also have the plums here, giving you that kind of very interesting fruitiness of the plum fruit against the vanilla. There's incense here. There's labdanum, cardamom, and leather. Really a wonderful offering and a great job. And this is an underrated house, the Collection Extraordinaire from Van Cleef & Arpels. Orchid leather at number 2. This is going to be a surprise for you guys, but I'm obsessed with this fragrance. This is Cherry Punk Extrait from the house of Room 1015. And what I like about this extrait version against the original, and the original does this too, it's its settlement to a black, dark vinyl rubber leather. Really great against the cherry. So it's black leather, saffron, cherries, tonka beans, patchouli, Sichuan pepper, violets, mimosa, jasmine. It's not lost cherry. It doesn't go gourmand. It doesn't go boozy. It goes leathery, rubbery, vinyl. You know, all of this stuff that comes to mind. So there's a leatheriness here, but more like that pleather, leather, vinyl kind of rubber kind of a smell, which makes for it a bit different than your typical leather fragrance. But lots of cherries, major fruitiness. Again, it might remind you of lost cherry, but then it's like it's not really lost cherry. It might remind you of another cherry fragrance. But other cherry fragrances that I know of don't settle to a leather. This one does, and it makes for a very exciting fragrance. This, you know, like this innocent side and this dark kind of bad boy side or something, or bad girl side. So Cherry Punk Extrait at number 1, a really, really great leather fragrance, a fruity leather fragrance, I should say. Anyway, those are the fragrances, the fruity leather fragrances. Let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Are you a fan of these? Do you have another fruity leather that you enjoy that I did not speak about today? Please let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video. Please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. And that fragrance that really got me into enjoying fruity leather fragrances way back in around 2013 is from the house of YSL in a collection that no longer exists and a fragrance that no longer exists. It's Noble Leather, this one right here. So I was hoping this fragrance would go into the the Le Vestiaire collection, which now they have Baby Cat, which is vanilla, incense, leathery. They also have Queer, the 2023 edition, which is more ozonic, oudi leather. This never made it, but this one to me is leather with dried fruits, vanilla, patchouli, and amber. For me, I got a lot of dried apricots and peaches and nectarines. No plums in this one, but a really, really smooth leather. It was almost very suede leather-like against this kind of fruitiness that's not overpowering. The balancing act is perfect. The leather with the fruits. Along the way, you have vanilla, patchouli, and amber as well. Really, really great fragrance. Sadly, this is all I have left that you can see. But I'm cherishing this one, keeping it high so nobody accesses it when they come here to the studio. But it's a really, really great fragrance. If you can get your hands on it, try and find it. If not, maybe there will be something that comes along the way that smells like this. I'll report on it. Or maybe YSL will relaunch it. Who knows? But maybe perhaps it wasn't a very successful fragrance. That's why they never relaunched it. But either way, Noble Leather is that bonus fragrance I'm talking about. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay tuned for another video soon. Bye-bye.